Hello and welcome to the Purple Rock Podcast. I am your host this week, Matt, and with me is Emma. And that's it. No one else.
Hello, everyone. Aren't you glad it's just blackjack and hookers like it's meant to be?
That's right. It's just the two of us. We are continuing to talk about Cook Islands. We're on the third and fourth episode now. And the whole Race Wars season premise is gone. It's out the window. Tribes are swapped.
Yes, as Jeff so cringily put it, they have integrated it.
God, why did he use
I was
that
like,
word?
Jeff, no, you're
God.
really highlighting the problem with the theme when you say that.
It's just he's so bad about he is every time he mentions the theme is when the theme is at its worst.
Yeah.
It's yeah. Fortunately, we don't have to talk about the theme anymore because that's in the past.
Yay. Just like all racism, right?
Yes. It's a thing of the past. It's totally cured now. We can move on into the integrated, as Jeff would say, present. God, I felt dirty even saying that.
Yeah, that's why I had to heavily introduce it as being a Probst thing, because it just feels bad.
It really does. Okay. So let's
do it.
Yeah, so the tribe swap, and it was I don't know how you felt about this, but the way it kind of seemed to me is the second the tribe swap, it seemed like people started playing the game a lot harder, or maybe it was just people who we hadn't seen playing the game we now see playing the game. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that could be because, half of these people had never gone to tribal council. So there's a little bit of that. But before we get too much into post-swap, I would love to just address a moment during the swapping itself, which is Flicka.
Yeah.
First of all, I mean, you already know she's a problem because Celia's like, oh, the cool girl with dreads. And I'm like, first of all, no.
Yeah, and then she, what does she say?
She says the sister on the left,
Nope.
or it might have been right. I don't remember. That part is not the part that matters.
Nope.
And it's so brief, it's so quick, but you can see Sandra give Rebecca and Stephanie this look that I want to live in forever as someone who likes talking shit about people.
And frankly, that was the same look I had when it happened, and the same look the person I was watching with had when it happened. Like, wait, what? You don't get to say that.
You don't. You cannot be. I mean, you can't say it anyway, but you cannot be a white woman with dreads. Calling black women sister. It's not acceptable.
No.
Unless she's literally your sister. Don't do that. Also, it's interesting the way, they clearly wanted everyone to be mixed up as evenly as possible with how you had to pick someone of who's not represented, blah, 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 but you still end up with Sandra as the only black person on her tribe.
Yeah, I did notice that. But that's because they had the weird restrictions where you had to pick someone that wasn't represented on your tribe, and and the women had to pick other women and the men had to pick other men. So
and Stephanie went last, and Becky chose Candace, and I wonder how she'll feel about that decision later on.
Yeah, that one might change a bit for her there. Yeah, I mean, look, this is not the tribe. This is not the tribe swap of Panama, where in retrospect, everything about that swap is just freaking hilarious. It's beautiful. It's the best moment of that season. But it is kind of funny how you see certain people choose Penner chooses Yule, right? And that's a classic. It's the chicken war is over. Yeah, and
also Yule is just the appropriate first round draft pick.
Well, yeah. Though I did notice, so the first episode of Immunity Challenge was the classic run in the water around the oval. The other tribe, even if Yule is very, buff and built and all that, he's still given up 6 inches to everyone on the other tribe, at least.
That
Oh,
tribe, I
very
mean,
tall.
it's amazing. Like, yeah, first of all, like Brad when they were in their original tribe seems really tall, and then he's on that tribe and it's like, oh, Adam's a giant.
Yes, yes, yeah.
A
Like all four.
giant douche. Oh, but also he's really tall. He's so
Yes,
tall and
all
punchable.
four guys on that tribe are like have to be mid, like have to be like at least like 6'2", like at least.
Yeah.
They're yeah, and I didn't realize that until they all stood next to each other, and then they were tackling Yule, and you're like, oh, they are so much bigger than Yule is.
It's amazing. I guess a credit to how the challenges go were designed that like the four men on that time are Brad, JP, Nate, Adam, and the is it four
Yeah,
men
it's
on the
four.
other tribe are Yule, Penner, Ozzy, and Cao
Cowboy.
Boi. And like, you know, Ozzy is good. We see Ozzy be good in the water for sure. But like when you're just looking at them, it's definitely a situation where you're like, oh fuck.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I
And because
mean,
their women are no slouches either
no,
on
no.
Raro. You know, you've got
Um,
Parvati, Jenny seems strong. Like,
right. Um, yeah, no, and I mean, and that first challenge where they're running through the water, being taller definitely helps
mm-hmm.
because if you can, the more it's easier for you to step out of the water, the easier it is to kind of make up that ground and all that. But
Right. Although Ozzy made me question that on that one immunity challenge when they're like running to then swim because what happened there?
yeah,
How
he
did he go so far so
he
quickly?
Ozzy is
How?
look, we talk about how good Ozzy is at challenges a lot. Uh, Ozzy is like freaking like Neptune, god of the sea. Like his
I
foot
mean,
touches water, and
Yule
he
did
is
want to start calling him Poseidon.
right. That's exactly. Well,
So he
like he
leans more
said
Greek,
Poseidon,
you
and then
lean
someone
more
else was like
Roman.
Neptune, and yeah, it was actually funny how they went to different sea gods. But no,
Yeah.
it's like the second he touches water, he's like gliding through that. It's uncanny. Um, but yeah, so we've now talked about challenges more than we probably ever do.
This is what happens on these rewatch podcasts, man.
Right?
I don't
Apparently,
know.
this is what interests us. Um, but yeah, so the tribe swap. Any other thoughts about kind of like the initial swap, how that went down?
Yeah, I think it's just sort of interesting how you see like who people land with and do other stuff. You could tell Brad was very happy that Cowboy wasn't on his tribe.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And Yule was like,
I
okay,
guess that's how it's gonna be. Yeah.
that's what we're doing. Okay, I guess that's what we're doing.
And I think though the problem is too with the theme, I know we were like, oh, we don't have to talk about the theme anymore, but I think another problem with the theme is normally on a normal season when you have swap tribes and people from their original tribes want to stick together, it's like, yeah, that makes sense, that's fine. But on this one, it's just like, okay, whites, let's team
Yeah.
up with the Asians. I mean, you even have Penner saying like, oh, we could go work with a couple of the Asians, and I was like, Penner, no,
Yeah, no, I cringed at that one. I was like,
no.
oof, oof, oof. Okay. Um, but one thing I did notice was like it seemed like the tribes when they swapped, even though they don't really know each other, like there are certain kind of personalities that definitely seem like they're like on like one tribe and mostly on like one tribe, and then certain ones that are on the other. Like the four kind of I'd say like most like jockiest guys, except for maybe Ozzy. Like Ozzy would be the one that was left out there. All
Right,
wound
but
up
he physically you don't see
right.
him with them too. Like you even had JP in the second episode, I think, talk about like how Ozzy like he's not very big, but he's
Yeah,
like
but
athletic.
yeah, he's
It's like yeah,
athletic.
it turns out that's actually the perfect body type for
Hmm.
Survivor challenges. So
Right, but even personality wise, like those four
mhm.
guys have like are like really in sync.
Yeah,
Especially like JP, Adam, and Nate.
yeah.
Um, and then but then like on the other tribe, you get like Penner and Yule, who like end up matching up kind of personality wise really well, and Cao Boi and Flicka, who end up matching personality wise like really well, and so it's
Yeah,
just
you
kind of
sort of have like the squares and the hippies.
right, exactly. But like, I don't think there's anyone on the other tribe that like Flicka or Cowboy would have been meshing as well with.
No.
And I don't think there's anyone quite as
Present day Parvati actually maybe would, but
yeah.
2006 Parvati not as
Mm-mm.
much.
No, no.
Although, maybe, I mean, she was still raised on like a commune, so.
That is true.
But
But
she's very much in a different lane at the moment.
right. But no, I was just thinking about like how like it did seem like there was like kind of enough personalities that it did seem like some of like the like people found each other in this swap.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, so after the swap, we had what is the greatest moment of these two episodes when Candace was asked what she about the Billy incident. Um,
First of all, I was right.
you were right. You were right.
I said Cece would go up to her the next thing and be like, I love that she was like, please don't be offended.
Yes.
And I don't know in which direction like she thought was gonna be the offense, but everyone else reacted, and like even like Penner got teasing her like, oh, you let him on, like
yes,
in a very like what clear like read to me at least is like pretty playful because everyone recognized like that makes no sense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Penner was being playful. Like I think they know each other maybe well enough that he can say that. Maybe not, but it definitely read that way to me. But I just love everyone else's reaction to that too. Like there was someone I don't remember who was like, Billy said that.
Yeah, and Becky was like, wait, just on the like you haven't seen him.
Yeah, and Candace was like silent for most of it. She was like, what? And she's kind of like standing there really awkwardly smiling, like, what is going on? I have no understanding of this whatsoever. She is. It was
like, sort of like how Andy said that Kim that his wife didn't remember that happening.
Right.
Didn't remember what she had said, and that Candace said, and you saw in the same like that Candace was sort of like, wait, why would that even? And it's like, oh, like he said, like they were like,
yeah,
oh, we love you,
right. It's just it's very funny to watch after like Billy's like heartfelt declaration of love to see Candace be like, I have no idea what he's talking about. This is what we said. I don't know where he got that from. Yeah. So
it was so good, so good.
Right. But then after that, we immediately get some alliances forming. We get, we have tribes of 9 now. So you need 5. And what happens? Yule and Penner come together and they seem to think they got 4 solid and maybe they can convince a 5th.
Yeah. Penner's very much like, oh yeah, I've got Flicka, it's fine. And like that sort of seems to like, oh, we were the 2 outsiders of, on that tribe. So that should be fine.
Right. And easily. Then when he finally goes to talk to her, it's like, oh, I do not have Flicka at all. Not in the slightest.
I'm just here to like make friends.
I can't believe she actually said, I'm just here to make friends. It's the
sorry, John.
Yeah, John, your line has been taken.
For the old school AV Club folk.
Yeah. Yeah, and frankly, I don't blame her because like she really didn't have a bond with Penner beyond the fact that they were outsiders.
So, right. In that they weren't, the other 3 is basically the extent of her bond.
Right. And yeah, and so right. And so where she does clearly have a bond with Cowboy. He's very much on her same wavelength. And so we kind of have like people, we have a bunch of basically twosomes. We have Cao Boi and Flicka, we have Yule and Becky, we have Penner and Candace, and we have Ozzy and Cecilia.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sundra's there, all alone, only person from her tribe, doesn't seem to immediately bond strongly with anyone in particular. And I guess one of the questions I had when all this was forming was, as the lines start getting drawn, one side wants to target Becky, the other side wants to target, like decides to target Cecilia. Why do you think Sundra wasn't a target?
Yeah, it is interesting. I wonder if I didn't notice enough in challenges to see, did she last, much longer? Maybe there's something like that, because there was a lot of talk about like weakness in terms of both Becky and Cece, and so it could be that. And then also, from what I can remember, I don't have like a completely encyclopedic memory of this stuff, but it seems like when there is just one person floating, they kind of, and you kind of think like, oh, they're going to be screwed. They kind of usually survive, unless it's like all one tribe and one person. But when it's like multiple tribes together, think of like Sarah Lacina in Cagayan, ends up being, you're just kind of seen as a valuable swing.
Right. You're seen as the tiebreaker, basically. Everyone kind of looks to you to break the tie. But, another way it could be looked at is you could be like, hey, we can keep the peace if we just vote this person out.
Right. Yeah. The way to punt the vote.
Right. A way to kind of punt the vote if you don't want to do something, like if you don't, maybe you're unsure about where that fifth person's going to go, or where, like if you can sway it to some. So, maybe that is the way to go. I don't know. But it's just kind of interesting to me that didn't seem to come up. It was like kind of very clear, like one side's opinion and then the other side's opinion. So
yeah, I definitely was like, like I wonder why they were so like, okay, well, Cecilia then it's just like, where'd that come from? But
right.
Then I was like, well, I guess those are sort of the choices. Yeah, it's either that or Sandra.
Right. And I guess the thing was they realized they probably weren't going to get Ozzy and Cecilia to flip to vote out like Flicka. So then it was, okay, so we have to target Cecilia and we have to get Cao Boi and Flicka to flip.
Yeah, and then maybe, you break up a potential pair, whereas Sandra doesn't have anyone she's going to.
Right, exactly. Right. So it's looking further ahead in the game. It definitely, if it works, it definitely does more for you because you break up that pair. But, it's just something that I noticed never coming up. And I was thought I'd bring it up. So and when the vote starts coming up and when the alliances start forming, it definitely seems like there's 5 votes to vote out Becky.
Yeah, watching the discussion, like after Penner talks to Flicka, like obviously I've seen the season, I know the result, and so I was just like, how is it not Becky? Like Flicka's just really, really into it, and so I think what ultimately happens, what's kind of funny is like, so Yul and Penner both have their jobs, to convince their sort of outlier tribe mates. Mm-hmm. And Yul does his job. It looks like he gets Cao Boi on board. Cao Boi was hesitant, but it looks like he got him on board. And Penner did not do his job.
No.
But then Cao Boi ultimately is able to convince Flicka. I wish we got a little more to understand why Cao Boi was convinced, like what, like we sort of hear it, but it's just not like totally clear, with what clicks in his head and if that's even the right move for him and stuff like that. But
I'd argue it's not based on what's going to happen, but
indeed.
No, I think they do more to show us why Flicka wasn't convinced by Penner than why Cao Boi was convinced by Yul, which is interesting because, of course, Yul's the winner of the season. This is an obviously early key moment. By the way, this is a spoiler podcast. You should have known that from last week. You better not be yelling at me about that. And this is an obviously key important moment where Yul does work to save not only himself, but his key ally and gain power in the tribe.
I mean, Beck going home would completely change his game.
Totally.
Like, absolutely. It really is kind of amazing watching those first 3 episodes. The like decoy, potential other person to go home was Sandra, Ozzy, and Becky.
I didn't notice that, but that's really great.
Like, what? That's crazy.
That is really funny.
There was, obviously it couldn't have been Yul the 4th episode, and I don't think it would have been anyway, but what a weird coincidence.
That is weird. I did not notice that, but that's good. So yeah, again, I think it's pretty obvious why Flicka wasn't convinced. As I'm watching and as the person with me is watching, we're both like, oh yeah, no, you're not talking to her in the right way. And I think Penner realized that afterwards, but after he already had been digging for a while and making the same mistake repeatedly. But Yul basically, I think, pitches Cowboy on like looking long term, looking ahead, and all that, and it works. Um, and so they flip. you know, I mean, I think that's really all it is. I think he just convinced them, like, hey, look, we have more potential allies down the road if you stay with us.
Yeah. And it is really funny, like just how much, like it was just like, I don't want to think about that.
Yeah.
What do we do there? You know, it really almost is surprising that Cowboy convinced her. I guess it just really shows how much she likes Cowboy.
I think it does. And also at that point, if Cowboy's flipping, they don't need her. So I think he could just be like,
Right.
hey, I
Might
think
as
I'm gonna
well
do
be
this. I
with,
think it's best for us, so you might as well come along, type of thing.
for sure. We'll have some of that to discuss for the next episode's vote as well.
Yeah. Um so yeah, so Cowboy and Flicka flip, and we say goodbye to Cecilia. We heard, gone
Yeah,
too
we
soon.
hardly knew you.
Yeah, gone too
Yep.
soon.
And
Um
there's not that much to say about that.
she's very
Ozzy's
good
mad.
looking. You know,
Because that's the main thing.
honestly, like I don't know much about her personality
No.
because she didn't get a lot of screen time, even in her boot episode. I guess the victim of being booted in a swap episode. But
She's the one who thinks to ask Candace about Billy, and for that we should be forever grateful
that is
because that
hundred
was
percent true.
fantastic.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. Just so good. Yeah, and then it's like, and this first episode was really kind of concentrated on that tribe. It's like we got like a bit of the groundwork laid for the other tribe about like, the guys are really bonding together, and Parvati starts bonding with Nate. But then the next episode is when those plot lines really take off, and we don't really see too much of the first tribe in the next episode. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think we spent a lot of time on Rero.
Right. And we get kind of a classic Survivor episode, which is to say, we get a downfall episode. And I didn't remember that this season had one of them, but makes sense, I guess, because there's so many of them. But this is a good downfall episode. JP's downfall is, it's one of those really classic arrogant leader, all the different things that usually lead to these. And it's just like a kind of a classic of the form. What'd you think of it?
Yeah, I thought that was a lot of fun. You have so much. I like forgot that there was actually the guys were actually in the minority.
Yeah.
So it's like they really should, like they were so clearly, I mean, I think the fact that the four of them are so big and strong like gave them a lot of confidence. And certainly, JP more so. But that I don't think you would see. I mean, they didn't, the other tribe just didn't connect in that same way anyway. But if
Right.
like, I don't think you would have seen like Penner, Yule, Cowboy, and Ozzy being like, well, we can just hang out the four of us and let the
Right.
girls do the work. I also thought it was I was actually kind of surprised how much Parvati we really get, because everyone always talks about like how as much as she is a Survivor legend, that her first season she's really kind of this non-factor and just this and blah blah, but she's really, in this quite a lot. Even she's the one like giving the confessionals about JP being a pain. She even mentions like something about like webs and eating. I was like, yes, Black Widow.
Yes.
And this, like Parvati Shallow's first ever tribal council hinges, like the tribal hinges on her siding with the women. That, who knew that competition reality could have multiple season long foreshadowing? That is art, I tell you.
Yeah, no, and I thought the show did a really good job of kind of boiling it down to like what was going to be the central battle for her, which is would she side with Nate and like listen to him because like it seems that he's her strongest bond on the tribe, or would she side with the women to keep their numbers and to vote out someone who she doesn't see helping them? And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was like, at the beginning of this episode, that tribe and especially the guys there are like convinced they can never lose a challenge.
Yeah.
And then when they
They
lose
win
the
one challenge and they're like, oh, clearly we are Karor. Nothing bad can ever happen to us.
right, and then they lose the reward, and it's like you can see like the fear in their eyes. You can see like the doubt that has crept in. They're like, oh, it's just a reward challenge. It's not one that matters. Like they have to convince themselves of this, and it clearly is that they're realizing like oh, we only have like the advantage in like certain specific skills, and we're gonna get smoked at other ones. And yeah, I mean, like Ozzy just completely outracing JP in the swimming portion of this was insane.
Completely. Like I will actually give JP credit because at tribal council when they were talking, and even before when they were talking about how like, oh, the women who didn't light the fire and they didn't get the fire, so that they lost. I was like, there's a whole nother portion of the challenge where they were ahead and then they were behind. And to JP's credit, he's like, hey, I got smoked out there.
Yeah.
And he absolutely did, but like I will give him, he ended up going home and he probably didn't think so, but like I'll give him props for being like, hey, like they were not the only reason we lost the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, like it definitely did not seem like when he was talking about that he was talking about like, oh, we have to get rid of these people, they're pulling us down. Like he didn't seem like he was talking about them that way.
No, I mean they I think thought that they had a freebie that Stephanie wanted to leave. It seemed like he actually, I was like surprised. It seemed like he was actually like, he must have been fairly close to her. Like he seemed genuine when he was like, because it wasn't just like at
trouble. Are you talking about
when,
JP or Nate?
JP.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because like Nate, it's like, yeah, they're on the same track, but like when he's voting, like he really is like, and you're just like a great person and just, giving you like what you wanted to do. Yeah. I wish that you hadn't done that.
Right. And it's funny because that was like all the guys like took what she said as like, oh, she wants to go home. Okay. But it seemed like they never checked back in with her afterwards. Right. It was just like, okay, she voiced it. Everyone agrees she's going home. And that was it. And it was like Nate was like, oh man, I really like Stephanie. We had a bond. And it's like, then go talk to her again. Like, have you not talked to her since she said that? Like, I mean, you could do that. It's bizarre.
Yeah, it's also, it was kind of funny though, seeing that happen, because when she eventually does go home, it's a very similar situation.
Yeah.
And so like you'd think, stop mentioning stuff you like at home.
Yeah.
Never talk about it again, apparently.
But one thing I was thinking was that, so I think, one of the things about the guys on this tribe was their arrogance and their kind of, thought that, oh, we can never go home, we're too useful, was kind of belied by the fact they lost 2 challenges this episode. And so it became really obvious, like, you know what? We don't necessarily need all of them, because having all of them didn't help us win today at all in either of these challenges. And, I think it made it easier for the women to be like, no, we don't need all 4 of them. Fuck them. Let's lose one.
Right. They're usually, in a challenge is usually going to, obviously the one where they, were in the circle, that's where having all of them really helped. But most of the time, you have like 1 or 2 people who has to do the big strength thing.
Yep.
And then you have the other, for other parts. So it's like, you've still got 3 that are still bigger than everyone else on the other tribe.
And you just lose the one who you think is the most obnoxious.
And the 3 are left are probably, a little more scared now. Like, okay, we gotta. That's right. Even though, and this is something I want to talk about for sure, Nate is the only one who votes with JP.
I didn't even notice that part. That's interesting.
Yeah. So, like Brad, we see get talked to by the women, but Adam, like when they were showing the votes, I was like, they only showed 2 Stephanie votes. That's weird. And so I was like, let's make a. And my husband's like, oh, well, maybe they just didn't show them. I was like, no, they always show. That's not how it works. Yeah. The maximum of the minority, because that keeps it, what's going to happen. So I made sure to watch at the end, and Adam vote for JP. And so I am so curious, like, because, Brad and Parvati were the last people to be convinced, right? Like, which one of them told Adam? You could think Parvati, but then why wouldn't she tell Nate?
Right.
And same thing with Brad. Like, is he that much closer to Adam? Like,
Yeah.
How did Adam find out?
I wonder if they just thought that Nate would tell JP. Like
Yeah.
maybe they just didn't want to clue him in that way, or maybe they did tell Nate, and he's like, "Well, I gotta stay with my boy JP for one vote." But
And
I'm with
maybe
you.
he's like, "Oh, I promised him,"
Right?
or
Yeah, maybe
something
it was
like
something
that.
like that.
That could
Maybe
be.
it'll
That
be
could
answered
be.
next episode. I don't know. I don't remember this part of Cook Island super well, so it'll
Yeah,
be
I remember
surprising.
enough to like know the votes and stuff, but not like such specific
Right. I
details.
know the general order, but not necessarily the specific one. Like I forget
Mhm.
sometimes who goes before who else. But and then JP's gone, and we got 2 episodes there. So there's not a lot to talk about here. We get, so one
There's a reason we doubled up.
yeah.
Hey.
One interesting thing that was brought up by the person I was watching with was we get 2 people sent to Exile Island here, and we don't see a single moment of their time on Exile Island.
Oh my God, you're right.
And she was
I didn't
like,
even notice that.
well, she was like, oh, like, why didn't we see anything? I'm like, well, because someone found the idol, so there's not a lot to see anymore.
Especially that exile is so barren.
Yeah.
Whereas like
Like,
Panama, which I also
you saw Candace like walking out to it. Like it seems like it's just offshore.
yeah. But it's like, that like having rewatched Panama recently as well, like that is like there's still like jungle on that island.
Right.
Whereas this one's just like, here's some sand, have fun.
Yeah, here's some sand and a giant X. It's
And so you're not even watching someone, if they are looking for the idol that's not there, they're just digging in sand. Whereas at least on Panama, like, people might be like, they're walking through the jungle, they're looking through,
right.
And, Candace and Adam, who cares?
Right, exactly. It was just it was something interesting that I noted from this.
Also, I just have to say, when Adam was sent away and he gets onto the boat, just really punchable.
I mean, that's
the
true
worst smirk.
That's true of most times with Adam. Like,
but it was like dialed to 11.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Even for Adam, that time was pretty bad. So, anything else to talk about with these episodes, or should we move on to what the people we're watching with thought of this?
I think it's safe enough to move on to what our viewing partners think.
Yes. So, do you want to go first here?
Either way, sure. Yes, for the sake of not dwelling on it. Yes. So Yule is still a favorite, but he does not like Penner, and does not like that Penner is tied to, does not like that Yule has tied himself to Penner. He is troubled by this. So the next few episodes should be a delight.
Yes.
Can't wait. And thinks Parvati is looking strong, thinks she could. So that's what I'm saying about like, a surprising amount of Parvati, because we think of her as not really making much of an impression. Right. But here, now, I do wonder a little bit. I will sometimes talk at my spouse after having viewed Survivor.
Yeah.
So he, has probably heard the name Parvati and the name Yule many times. Mm-hmm. The problem is how well he absorbs this. Right. Because as you have heard, not so good with the names of celebrities, such things. When I'll, share for the class, when Christopher Plummer passed away, I mentioned that, and he was like, oh God, like how? And I was like, of being 91. Like, who do you think I'm talking about? Jesse Plemons is who he thought I was talking about. The biggest one is mixing up Dionne Warwick with Marshawn Lynch, and I don't know what to tell you guys. I don't know how it happened.
That one made perfect sense. You just had to kind of follow the logic there.
Like, we're not even football fans. It's really more surprising that he even knows who Marshawn Lynch is than that he's mixed them up.
Yeah.
So it's very possible that he's already forgotten. But there was a great moment before Winners at War. We were hanging out with some of his friends, and one of his friends randomly said, "Hey, do any of you guys watch Survivor still?" And I was like, "Yes." perk up. Why?
Right.
And I think it was either his family or work or something was like doing a pool for Winners at War, and he's like, "Yeah, I like pulled like we just pulled names randomly, got like a Parvati shallow," and I was like, like gasp. I was like, "She's my favorite." So like that was like a thing. So he very well might remember, and that's why he's like, "Wow, she looks strong." And I'm like, this is not her season.
Yeah.
So we'll see. He's turned around on Ozzy. He says he no longer seems that obnoxious. I think he
Right.
was impressed with the challenge. That I think was kind of his main thoughts. He definitely thought Becky was going home. He was surprised by
Okay.
that vote and thought JP was the right call. I don't think he had a strong opinion on like Becky or Cecilia because like it was like, well, I like Yule, so I'd like his
Right.
ally to still be there. How about you?
Okay. So, as I think I mentioned last week, this is my partner's first season of Survivor, or at least like the first one where she like actually kind of remembers it. So, one of the interesting things is I don't think I keep trying to be like, who do you like? And then she like tries to like assess like, I think this person will go far, or like this person is like strongly suited to the game. I'm like, yeah, but no, but who do you like? And like, I don't
Yeah.
think she's like getting into like the rooting aspect of it yet.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty easy to see who she doesn't like. She really doesn't like Cowboy. The scene where he knocks out the she was kind of out on him,
Yeah.
and then he knocks out the nest, and she's like, no,
Yeah,
that's
that's
very
hard.
revealing. She thought that was very revealing of him, and frankly, I kind of agree.
Yeah.
And
I was
then
impressed that they found such a perfect branch to put the nest back,
right,
though.
I'm sure
Like,
Ozzy just like had that somewhere around,
like
right?
oh, like it's the right length. It has the right like branches to hold it. Like, what? You could not find a more perfect tool.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Anyway, not the point.
Right, not the point.
That was crazy.
She definitely did not like JP, and when he was kind of going around, she was like, why don't they just vote him out? And then like when they did, she was like, good, that was the right decision. So she definitely like was on board with that. She thought that Parvati's flirting was, it's like she was basically like, how is this not super obvious? Like, how does he not realize what's going on here? This is really obvious. This is really blatant. And I was just like biting my tongue not to say anything there. But I'm like, yeah, it kind of is. Doesn't really
Yeah, I
matter.
was like, she's hot, so it's fine.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's all that. But
It is funny watching though because at the premiere party for Winners at War, I met Nate and talked to him. It's sort of like, oh, you've got two Cook Islands people who you're rooting for. He's like, oh, Parvati's like my sister.
yeah,
Like they're very very close still to this day, and like really really good friends. He said he actually helped like kind of helped her like set up with a Fincher, who's now her
oh,
husband. So
interesting.
it's kind of funny that they're like thing starts with all this like flirtation thing, and now they're just like really tight friends 15
You know,
years later.
honestly, I actually really like Nate when he's around Parvati. I think it like reveals like a different side of him that I don't think was coming out with other people. Like he seems like more like thoughtful and kind of like like
The
when he's
scene
not
where
like, oh wow, she's super attractive.
yeah, the scene where they're talking together at the fire, I think,
Yeah,
is a very interesting.
no,
Because
that's the
like
one I was thinking of too.
yeah, it's not the Candace and Adam stuff you get. Like
No,
they are really talking and they're
yeah,
talking about the game and they're working. So you can see like, yeah, like sure she's flirting. Like it is strategic and it's not like, oh, I'm using these guys. It's just like I am charming. I will make people will like me when I'm charming to them.
yeah, no, exactly.
People.
And no, yeah. So I was actually kind of a little surprised to find myself responding that way because I didn't remember responding well to Nate when I first watched, but it has been a while. So
Indeed.
um, not as long as you, but I also don't remember things as well as you. What else? So she also thinks that Ozzy is going far. Last week she was like, I think Yule might win, and this week she's like, Ozzy, he's going to go very far. He's going to go, and she was now talking about him possibly winning. So,
Oh, she's good.
because she's like, he's really good. He seems really good in challenges. She was very impressed by his swimming, very impressed by how fast he got up to JP, and she's also taken note of no to the fact that he's the big provider. And she's like, it's like, yeah, you'd want to keep that person around because you want more fish.
It
And
is wild how much fish he catches.
yeah, no, he catches like
Like
seven.
they each have like a fish and a half, and then that one fish was huge.
I know the one on the end was so huge, and they're like, yeah, and it's like he caught like all but two of them, I think.
Yeah.
And
Like we caught 9
and
fish.
she was like,
I
"What's
caught
Jonathan
7.
doing? Just sitting in the boat?" And I'm like, "He might take his turn." But yeah.
Yeah, I was watching, and since we've watched a few, we watched Pearl Island. I was like, "Oh, Rupert is shaking." He left.
Yeah.
I was like, "I can make Survivor jokes.
Yeah.
Did you get them?"
So the other thing was, she was kind of concerned, I guess would be, as she was like, after the first episode we watched this week about how the early game favors kind of like the big strong guys. Big and she was like, it really seems that like those people don't get like wouldn't get voted out early, because it seems that they're really necessary. And then after JP gets voted out, she's like, okay, so it seems that you need some of them, but not all of them. And I'm like, yeah, that's right. Like you need a couple of them early. And then I was like, and the thing is, like once you get after the merge, they become the target. Everyone wants to get rid of them. She's like, okay, yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
And they can't all win immunity at the same time, so.
Right. So, but it was something that I think I'm actually really happy JP went home this week, because I think she was like very unhappy at the prospect that a portion of the game would so heavily favor like a type of person.
Right.
And I think she was kind of like, okay.
But we don't know anything about how that feels.
We don't know anything about that. But I think it kind of like made her feel a little better that JP went home. And I mean, hey, so far three of the four boots are men. So
yeah,
that's not that's not that usual in the game. So I think those are most. Oh no, the one thought she had was, I asked her after JP went home, I was like, do you think the women will stick together? And she's like, no. Like immediately, no hesitation. She's like, nope, that was a one-off. And I was like, damn, you nailed that part.
She's good at this. Maybe she should play.
Yeah. No, she like 100%. She's like, no way. So yeah, I don't think she also noted that like like how like Penner was not connecting at all with Flicka. I don't think she likes Penner. I did ask her if she thought he sounded like Alan Alda, and she's like, I'll have to listen for that. But then she didn't get back to me.
I'll have to bring that up. I didn't think of it. Oh, another funny thing I didn't think of initially, because it was only after episode 3 and not episode 4. But after episode 3, I forget what say, something about, who was likely to be captain, yada, yada. And I, kind of slipped and was like, oh yeah, well, Ozzy for challenges. And he was like, Ozzy doesn't seem that good at challenges.
It's like,
but
yeah,
I was like, oh, well, and then I was just like, oh, well, I mean, on their tribe, like you've got Yule, like the other men are, so I was able to kind of like paper it over, but it was delightful to hear. But, the very next episode, then he's like, oh, right. Okay.
She was also very surprised at Cao Boi's fire making. At first, she was like, what is he even doing? And she's like, I guess if it's going to work, he'll be like the hero, or he'll be like the easy vote out if it doesn't.
Which is what Probst said.
Yeah. And I mean, she was 100% on, with Probst on that one. And yeah, and then it worked. She's like, no, I guess that worked. She's like, that was weird though. Why did he do that? And I'm like, I don't know.
The thing about Cao Boi though, the fire gets lit, your headache goes away.
He is weird, but he is effective at what he does, I guess, until he's not in the game anymore. So
and even then, it was weird, but he came up with a very effective strategy.
Look, we'll talk more about that. That is gonna have.
I know, but like that's like his whole thing. It's like how he gets there is weird as fuck.
Yes,
but it fucking works.
It's
that was true. A lot of swearing in a row.
No, it's true. It's true. So those are my partner's thoughts so far. So I guess we should talk about, like we did last week, just kind of check in on the returnees and what we're thinking of their game so far.
Yeah, we got so many returnees, and right now, so much time. Yeah, so again, this tough one to judge Candace because she was on exile at the time and didn't even vote. But it was sort of interesting, just seeing how much they were like relying on her as a vote when every time she plays, she flips on people.
Yeah, well, obviously they don't know that yet.
No, of course not.
And it was interesting how she's like, all I want to do is get back to Adam and Parvati. And it's like, yeah, you're already talking about that. Didn't remember
That is
line
how
being
you
so
feel.
early. Yeah. Didn't remember you mentioning that so early, but okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Parvati thing I kind of already addressed. It's really funny to me that her first vote involved like siding with the women, and that they weren't sure that she'd go for it, which I guess she did hesitate, which kind of surprised me because she had talked about not liking JP, but I guess that talk she had with Nate really kind of had her slow playing and thinking about it. But obviously she came around.
Yeah, I mean, I think it did make more sense to go with the women for her, but also I think the one thing she had to balance that I don't think we got like a great insight into was like how close Nate and JP were. Like, like
right.
how worried he would be if she voted out JP. Because while he seemed like okay, like he seemed like okay with JP, but he also seemed like okay without him. Like he definitely was thinking of like, I want to keep him around longer so that he's the shield. Like frankly, Nate's strategy is basically a meat shield strategy, right?
Right.
Just talking about super early. So yeah, and so I think that's like the one thing she had to balance. But I wasn't surprised at the decision she made. But if she'd gone the other way, like, I don't think that would have been surprising either, frankly.
Yeah, and I think we see like hints of how her gameplay works and how it needs to be developed with time, which is fun. Penner, I think we see how just people just always kind of don't trust isn't quite the right word, but just like don't it's like they're just like not quite sure they want to side with it. The way that Flicka can't be convinced by him, but at the same time, when he's with certain people, like Yule and Becky were like, yeah, let's work with Penner and Candace, like perfect.
Yeah, my takeaway from Penner, and I think this is always my takeaway, like Penner has like one gear. He can't really like change it up too much. Like he has like one way of talking to people. And if you don't really respond to his way of talking, you're just not going to work with Penner. And if you do, you'll be a good ally. Like Yule and him and Becky, like Yule and Becky were with him. Like they're
logic-based people.
Right. But like where they have the ability to kind of like understand how to connect with other people a bit more. Like Penner's got like one gear. And I think he's like more sure of his ability to kind of like convince people over to his way of thinking. And they're like, okay, like we need to do work. And he's like, oh no, I have this.
Penner's interesting because he's very logic based, but not a game bot at all.
Yes, I agree with that. I think it's one of the reasons why I like him as a character so much.
Right. He's so fun to watch.
Right. Though so far I don't think he has been shining.
No, we know too much.
We know too much. He'll come around. But right now he's definitely one of those people that, for the new person I'm watching with is like, yeah, I don't know what he's doing. And I'm like,
yeah, same, similarly. I have to avoid calling him Penner.
It's really hard. It's really hard.
Jonathan.
Right. And then we get. Sorry.
Oh, I think we were going to say the same thing. I was just going to say, Yule is.
Yule is Yule. He had
Yule.
like the. Right, yeah, he had.
Cuffs, man.
Yeah, he had the one big moment this episode, which was convincing Cao Boi. And I was kind of surprised they didn't spend more time with that. But also, like, maybe he didn't spend more time than that. Maybe that's all it took.
Yeah, I think, similarly to Penner, which is why they connect, he focuses on logic, but he's just, he is, like we said before, he's just such a soothing presence.
Yeah.
That I think even if, you are coming from a different gear, you're just like, yes, that does make sense. Thank you for explaining it. And that, sort of show, and obviously like seeing how connected he is with Becky, that he really wanted, to have like people to work with, which is maybe why he did a lot of pre-gaming on Winners at War, but unfortunately it shows a lot of people who also knew each other.
Yes.
And thus he was not their priority. I'm still upset.
Yeah, no, me too. And then
I
there's Ozzy.
voted out Nick. Why wasn't he an option? Why was it Wendell or Yule? Why not Nick?
I don't know.
Anyway, that's dwelling on the past and also the future.
I think it's something like that.
Yeah.
And then there is Ozzy. Ozzy is the last of the returnees we haven't discussed yet. Obviously a very good episode for Ozzy in terms of the things he always does well. He did well in the challenge. He provided a lot of food. What did but I think the kind of the more interesting aspect of Ozzy this episode is he comes into the swap and he's like, he comes at my fault. After Cecilia's gone, he's like, I'm going to, it's like, I'm going to burn this down. I'm going to get revenge, all that. And, we kind of know how, it's like, I'm going to stop providing for them. And he seems just over that. And like, he's just like back to being himself, like really quick afterwards. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I think there's a little of the like, well, I am hungry.
Yeah.
And then also it's like, it's not like he was in lockstep with Cecilia before, or anything like that. Like, I think he's had stronger connections that he's gotten burned on in future seasons. So I think, but you do see a little, because he will react that way and be like, very aware of the power he has in terms of being the provider. Sort of like, well, I can always just stop. But I think it was also like, well, if I'm gonna, then they won't keep me.
Yeah, I think he always, there's a petulance to Ozzy that comes out there, which I think makes more sense in this season because he's younger in this season than obviously he is 24. When he comes back. Yeah, he's pretty young here. Like he looks like a kid in this season, especially compared to his future seasons.
I mean, he's one of, I think he's the youngest guy out there.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's like a petulance that really doesn't look good, and then it just like doesn't come up again the rest of the episode, and so it's just kind of covered over, and instead you get Ozzy just being a team player and helping everyone out.
And running on water.
Literally, it looked like he just like was running on top of the water. I cannot explain that. So.
I don't understand, and he's not tall.
No, but he was high stepping. He had that high stepping going. So
it's I don't know how.
He is good at what he does. So yeah, you know what? I realized what I said there.
Oh well, if you want to see what Ozzy does, we know a place for you.
We do indeed. And then you can assess whether what I just said is actually accurate, because I have no idea in that context. So.
I can't wait to reveal that. I'm gonna wait it out, because I'll always say kind of before a season, like, this is how many returners there are, and by like the finale, like it doesn't have to be after the finale, but like when it's that, be like, okay, who do you think it'll be?
I like that, actually. I might do that.
It's fun. It's fun. I'll tell you, when my husband found out Shane had never come back.
Yeah, frankly, I'm still surprised by that.
Yeah,
so.
I was like, oh, that was a whole controversy. Don't worry, you are not alone. That was a whole thing. He was definitely surprised ours came back, so I had to be like, okay, so here was the dynamic with his brother, and why it actually made sense and was not a terrible pick. Danielle, I can't explain. I got nothing. But so that should be fun. But I have to wait until then, and then I can be like, he's come back a bunch. Also now, guess what he does?
Yeah, indeed. Anything else about these episodes?
No, I think that might be it.
Okay, then we're gonna wrap it up on the shorter side. Where can they find us?
They can find our website at www.purplerockpodcast.com. They presumably know where they can find the podcast because they're listening to it. Right. You can follow the show's Twitter account at Purple Rock Pod, but more importantly, you can follow my account at Purple Rock Emma, and if you feel like it, you can follow at Purple Rock Matt, but I don't know that it's worth your time. There's other people on our staff, but they are not here, and thus they do not matter to me.
Nor me. Let's hit the theme music.
Hey.